So the last time I was talking to you guys, I was going to about this NENI thing. We're going to talk about that today. But all right, so storytellers. There are different kinds of storytellers, and I'm gonna explain the premise to each perspective of storytelling, and then I'm gonna explain to you why. But the main thing that we're going to talk about is some stories seem mature, some stories seem immature, and I'm going to explain to you why one would seem mature and one would seem immature. But I don't think the immature version is wrong. It's just, all right, so first of all, we're going to have to compare most of the stories told in the West and most of so it's more prevalent. There's a trend in storytelling that's more prevalent in the West, and another trend that's more prevalent in the East, but they're not necessarily defined to one. For example, Dragon Ball Z. Now, Dragon Ball Z is the kind of never ending story. Every episode is basically the same. It just keeps on going, keeps on going. And the kick is that you're never going to run out of things to watch. Now, in storytelling, people usually say that if it doesn't have a plot, a mature plot, it's not complete. And if at the end of the story someone hasn't reached a proper message or character development, anything like that, then the journey in the story wasn't actually worth it or something like that. So now I'm going to bring a bunch of examples just to make it more tangible what I'm talking about, right? So on this side, you got Dragon Ball Z. And the original Dragon Ball, which is a little different, is considered to be for a mature audience. Dragon Ball Z, although the characters are actually older, it's for a younger audience. So, stuff on this side may seem like it's for a younger audience, which isn't exactly wrong. And then the more serious stories on this side, the more academic ones, the ones where you apply sociology and all those real world issues and no, I mean seriously, man. A story is just a story. All right? Everybody's got a right to tell a story. Then you criticize the stories and you're like, this is good because of these reasons. All right, so there's got to be some sort of criteria with which to gauge, with which to navigate through some story. But not every story is a thesis statement. And I know what a thesis statement is because I've been telling people how to write thesis statements. Get your facts in order and make sure everything comes down to one point. Narrow down your ideas. So, this is basically introverted intuition versus extroverted intuition. And I'm going to show. So, see, I'm not rambling this time, although I am pro NE. But this, I'm presenting all of this in the NI format, which is I do have a point. Alright, so I was gonna draw this with you guys, but alright, so the screen's mirrored, but I'm just gonna point to this side. That's the version where it's more focused, like the story's got a point and the reason you're telling this story. For example, Mean Girls or Daria. All right, so movies versus TV series. Do you prefer to watch movies or do you prefer to watch a TV show with a number of seasons and a number of episodes just keeps on coming the next time? Like, do you want your story to end now or do you want to keep it going for a couple, like, you sometimes you need to follow a story not because you need an end, but because you need a continuation. All right. So when you take, especially stuff that's meant for teens or whatever, um, so Mean Girls obviously has a point to it. The people who made Mean Girls made it to tell a story and to, there are definable goals at the end of a movie, some sort of goal that someone's trying to reach. When Pinocchio finally gets to the Blue Angel, something, it ends. But he goes through like a bunch of other um, adventures as well. Like the fox and the cat, they trick him to bury his stuff in the ground. That's when he was going to school. And then the whole thing about the whale's stomach, like he spends an entire arc inside. So, within the movie Pinocchio, there's like several arcs. But if you were watching Dragon Ball Z, it just keeps on going from like, it just goes on for like a 300 episode arc, perhaps. And then when you finish it, you start off with another arc. And when you're done with the series, you just come up with more series. Like it never ends. Which is why I'm calling the extroverted intuition version the never ending story. It never ends. And then on this side, you have, uh, what was to say? So, intrinsically neat is a play on in introverted intuition. It's NI and NE, so let's just write that down as well. Because I was supposed to write it as I was telling the story, but now here is, so this is just the premise. This is just one of the premises. This premise is that this type of story is better than this type of story. And you can come up with your own thesis argument for why this is better than this. That's usually the common, uh, contrary to popular belief. Yes, that's the accepted or favored version of the story. Basically, the reason I've been talking about intuition and stuff in the recent past is because it's in your 30s or in your 20s that you actually try to start noticing these things and actually get into it. Because, it comes with life experience, especially if you're a feeler, especially if you're a sensor. Now, children can develop the sensory at an early age, obviously, because they have more, what is it called? Well, I mean, obviously, babies stick marbles in their mouths, not for the taste, but because of the sensory pleasure, because of the physical presence of something inside the mouth. So obviously, kids are a lot more sensitive and they experience things, and like the sensory experience is not something that a person has to develop. It just comes naturally. But then some kids may prefer the intuitive to the sensory. That's not exactly what you see right in front of you, but what's beyond that. So at a certain age, or like, if you're watching kids, you might see some kids who seem to be smarter than other kids because the sensory kids focus on what's right in front of them, but the intuitive kid might think of the abstract behind it, and then that would seem smarter for kids. But that's not necessarily the case. It's just perceived that way because most kids would follow this thing, but it doesn't mean that this kid is better than this kid. It's just he's doing something else that's more common with like an older crowd. So it looks like although these two kids are the same age, him looking up at the branches of a tree and him looking down at the roots on the ground, these are just two kids who are playing in the same ground, who are just focused on different things, and it seems smarter to us. This is exactly why stories with a point and stories with a thesis seem smarter even when adults do it. Because, the other version is more childish. It's what kids do. Like kids, they tell a story without actually thinking about where it's going to end. They just want to tell a story and keep telling the story. But there's nothing wrong with that because at the end of the day, the value of a story is in its entertainment value and what so the story is like a boat or a ship that you ride to get across the river that is your life. Most stories are moral stories that you tell to a specific person at a specific time so that it could help with their life. For example, let's say that I notice you have all right, you're waiting for some important decision to be made. All right. All right. Let's say I'm sitting next to a dude at a maternity ward place. I'm there because I came with somebody who needed to, I don't know. I'm I'm the doctor's son, right? So like I haven't any investment emotionally. So I'm not emotionally invested in this situation. But the guy next to me, his wife's in the ward giving birth, and he's anxious. So at this moment, to calm him down, I would tell him one of Aesop's stories. Basically, the point that I want to get across is there's no point in worrying, it's out of your hands. So I would tell him a story that has the same meaning as something like that. Like, Sisyphus was trying to roll his rock up the mountain, but it keeps falling down. I don't know, it's meant to distract the person next to him and hopefully give him the answer or the solution to whatever he's facing right now. You can do that with extroverted intuition by just making something up. So there's a time and place for everything, and in fact, all right, so I'm gonna to break this into two parts because I actually haven't completed this train of thought all the way through. But there is something that I'm building on right now.